So these three C's are, the first one is curiosity. I remember myself as a kid when I was told, it's not good, don't be curious, it's bad. And I'm blown away. How did we do that? Curiosity is such a beautiful strength, leading by curiosity. And the second one is compassion and self-compassion, which we raised already. And really the self-compassion part is important. And the last one is courage. It takes courage to get into your next conversation, to take on your next challenge. So if you could take these three as a mindset and apply them to your next difficult conversation, to your next challenge, what would that look like?
And welcome back, everyone, to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. I'm David, and today I am here with Marielle. Is it Marielle or Marielle?
You can say both way, Marielle in French and Marielle in English.
Okay. I'm not going to even attempt your last name. How do you say your last name?
Métrailler.
Métrailler. Okay. Yeah, c'est bon? Yeah,
C'est
okay.
bon?
Okay. You're too polite. Well, Marielle, I'm going to hand it over to you for a few seconds to introduce yourself and what do you do and what do you focus on?
Yes, what I do. Thank you so much for inviting me to this podcast. It's very exciting. I am an executive and leadership coach, and I usually help people with a scientific or technical background move into leadership positions and have these high-performing teams. That's me in a nutshell.
Okay, yeah, and you come from the pharma industry. I noticed, right?
Yep. Yes. So I have a bit of a weird trajectory here. I come from the luxury industry originally, and then the pharma industry and biotech, and yeah.
Okay.
But I've spent more than 10 years in pharma. Yeah.
Okay. That's quite the weaving career there. What did you do in luxury?
In the luxury, I was doing marketing and sales. So yes, that's also quite the change because I went from marketing and sales in the luxuries to regulatory affairs in a biotech, and then to scientific affairs and regulatory affairs in an association for the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay. So, so thank you. Like when we were discussing off camera, what you feel is most important for our listeners today to make them from good leaders to great leaders. You mentioned that you focus on conscious leadership, and I've heard various forms of this, and I am interested, and I think the audience would be interested in understanding, what do you mean by conscious leadership?
Yeah, so conscious leadership is an approach to leadership that really focuses on self-awareness, but also awareness of the systems in which the leader works. So we were talking about impact the leader has on not only his employees, his company, but also really at a broader scale, especially if you think about global companies as well. So it's about systems thinking as well, but it all starts with self-awareness. And then awareness of others. So awareness of your emotions, awareness of, but really all stakeholders that are included in your company, not just your employees, your clients, but also your suppliers and anybody who has a contact with your company. And then really the biggest part of conscious leadership is not only to be aware of that, but then to revisit the commitment that comes with it, to revisit all these relationships and making sure that really, ultimately, you want everybody to thrive.
I am curious, like, why is this so important right now? Like, it's in my circle of interactions and learning about leadership. It's become a much more prominent topic over the last few years. This idea of self-awareness and your impact on others, and when you're an individual contributor, your impact is big. But when you're a leader, you impact whole organizations. right? Like
Yes.
it's you can multiply good things, but you can also multiply bad things.
You
And
can. Yes.
so I've seen a greater focus on this. And I guess like my question to you, like, why do you think there's such a big focus on conscious leadership now versus like, say, a decade ago?
Well, we're in a complex world, uh, and we hear a lot about VUCA, so volatile, uncertain. You've heard the term. I think in a simpler world, it seems obvious, it's simple. You have your organization, you want to make a profit, which is still what a conscious leader wants to do. But now the world is really global. So what is right in one area might not be in others. And I
Mhm.
came across this one several times actually this week, where somebody thought, when I was in my little department, making that decision was easy and obvious.
Mhm.
And then suddenly I'm in a higher level, and oh, I didn't realize that there were all these other actors and the whole system that makes this decision not that simple. It's becoming really more complex. And
Mhm.
I think I work with scientists and tech people in tech. So usually they tell me the simplest solution is the most elegant solution. It's beautiful. But with human beings, I think if you have a simple solution, then probably you missed a big part. Some of your actors here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's nothing simple. So I think that's probably where this movement towards conscious leadership. So it also includes ESG, so the environment,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
is also part of the topic. Yes.
Yeah. It's simple doesn't mean is not mutually exclusive from complexity. And
Yes.
the concept could be boiled down and made simple, right? But the complexities come in. And this is where I think I have some peers and colleagues that are wonderful at this, just understanding, and they see the complexities and the dependencies of certain decisions and all the people it would impact, and that's where their head goes first. And
Yeah.
those are some of the people I really respect. Right,
Mhm.
their head goes there first. Sometimes you can get wrapped up in the emotions of that and what that happens. And I've personally gotten better at that over a number of years, like appreciating the dependencies, the impact on others, and how that affects others. But I could say for myself, at least, Marielle, I think I've been affected because I can detach myself from the emotions,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't mean I don't have it. I feel for people, but I'm able to make those decisions because I can detach myself from the emotions of it and worry about the emotions later. If you want
Later.
to say, I'll cry later.
So we don't want to suppress them. We want to
It's not
acknowledge them and
suppressed.
really
Yeah.
understand and be aware of them. And
It's
we don't
cognitive
necessarily have to
empathy.
act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's, I think what they call cognitive empathy. It's like
Mhm.
understanding what the impact is, right? Versus like, I'm feeling what you're feeling right now. There's
Yeah.
a difference there, right?
This is where I try to use the word compassion rather than empathy. I'm moving towards this a little
Mm.
more. Empathy is really feeling other people's feelings,
Hmm.
which can be, well, it can be freezing. It can be sometimes hard to
Yes.
feel everybody's feelings.
Yeah.
And I find with the word compassion, you have that just notch of a distance here that will allow you
The
to
detachment.
a slight detachment without being detached. It's still compassion,
Hmm.
but you're with the person. It's a comp with, not in it.
Hmm.
That can allow you to act. And I love the compassion. Really, there is that self compassion element that I see is missing for so many leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes, we've talked a lot about that on this podcast too. Is that many leaders are, and the folks who have been on this podcast are very self conscious and self aware, but we can say like our the voices that we have in ourselves. Sometimes we are so harsh on ourselves,
Oh
like
yeah, the inner
harsher
critique.
than anyone could ever be.
Hmm.
So you mentioned three C's.
My three C's.
Yeah, your three
Yes.
C's to
Yeah.
conscious leadership. What are they?
And the 3 C's is it's my little invention. It's not the official conscious leadership
Yeah.
theory. My 3 C's, it's a mindset approach. I find that sometimes, even with listening, for instance, so if I have to teach someone how to listen and list all the things they're supposed to listen to, oof, there's a lot. And again, I remember myself as a coach at the beginning, I was like, what was I supposed to listen to again? And it's a little overwhelming. And I think if you can change it at the mindset, it's a little easier. So these 3 C's are, the first one is curiosity. I remember myself as a kid when I was told it's not good. Don't be curious. It's bad. And I'm blown away. How did we do that? Curiosity is such a beautiful strength. So leading by curiosity. And the second one is compassion and self-compassion, which we've raised already. And really the self-compassion part is important. And the last one is courage. It takes courage to get into your next conversation, to take on your next challenge. So if you could take these 3 as a mindset and apply them to your next difficult conversation, to your next challenge, how would that look like? What would that change? If you could be a little more curious. And because I work with scientists very often, I tell them, put on your scientist hat. It's exactly what you do. It's the exact same mindset. And apply it to human beings and human relationships.
That's very interesting. I do. Could we go through some of those 3 C's?
Yes, absolutely.
And because I don't want to make any assumptions here. I don't want folks listening to make assumptions like, what does it mean to be curious? And I do agree, like folks who are scientists or like engineers, naturally there is a curiosity, right? But for folks listening out there who don't come from that background, when you say curiosity, what's a good example of what that is and how to apply it?
I think I want to go back to when people feel that they don't know, is go back to your childhood and really apply that beginner's mindset, that pure, I want to know, I want to understand, I want to learn. And most people do have that somewhere, or used to have it before they were told it was bad to be curious. It was bad to ask questions. It's always fun if you are in disagreement with someone, if there is something difficult, if you become really truly curious and want to understand where they're coming from or what's happening here, then you're not gonna hurt anything. You're truly wanting to understand. And it's not that listening to respond that Covey mentioned, but really listening to understand.
I think if more people did that, listening to understand, that would be a wonderful world. Where do you see, like, you do a lot of coaching. You do some better up coaching. You have a private practice too, and I'm sure you work with a lot of organizations, nonprofits,
and I work with women leaders in pharma as well.
Women leaders in pharma. So so some people working in pretty complex, bureaucratic, large organizations. I guess, like, where do you see in the people you coach, where do you see they need the most work when it comes to the 3 C's?
Usually start with just my first one, curiosity. Curiosity is huge. It's forgotten, and it can make such a huge difference to add that one. I see this more as a triangle. I don't think I can say one is more important than the other. Compassion and self-compassion are just fundamental to any approach to relationships. And that self-compassion piece, I see this so often.
Yeah.
With perfectionism, with the imposter syndrome, with all sorts of things. So compassion and self-compassion are so, so important. And courage, I know this as well. I mean, and even to be in your coach seat and sometimes ask that question, it takes courage. If you want to be curious and ask difficult questions sometimes, even if you do it in a way that is compassionate and that is openly curious, it still takes a lot of courage.
What do you see is holding people back from being curious, compassionate, self-compassionate too, or having the courage?
So I suppose there are different depending on what it is. I suppose curiosity is really a learned one, that we should not be curious. Schools sometimes teach that, and it's so sad. We are not going to school to learn and because we're curious, but for grades.
Mm-hmm.
So that is sad and probably learned to not be curious anymore. Science, they are still curious, but about the things and maybe not so much about human beings. It's not taught. Compassion. Well, it's a difficult world, and I suppose some of the social media as well is in the way, where you see all these seemingly perfect people all the time and you start comparing yourself, and that's the self-compassion piece can be hurt there. If you start comparing yourself with people who don't actually exist, it's very hard. And courage. I don't know, it's lost somewhere a bit. Sometimes people have, especially you mentioned also, I do work with really large organizations. Sometimes it's a bit of it is so big that there is a little sense of hopelessness sometimes. I can't really impact this system. It's so big.
And it's also like, what's the consequences
Yeah.
of speaking up in certain situations?
Yes. Yeah. And for really large organizations, what's interesting is sometimes you see pockets of departments where you're like, oh, that one seems to be working really well, and they feel happy and engaged. And other pockets where you're like, ooh, this is hard. And it's the same organization. I think it's a mistake to think there is one culture across the whole organization when it's a really large one. It's very hard to maintain one culture through a global organization.
Yeah. Yeah. So for people listening out there then, and let's just say you're a leader of a small team of 5 people and you want to cultivate more, these 3 C's more in your whole team: curiosity, compassion, and courage. What are some steps they can take now?
I think the first one is to model it. You need to become all of this first. And then I think they also would really promote innovation. In a lot of organizations, we say, oh, there's no more innovation, there's not enough, etc. I think these 3 C's would also promote innovation. So if you promote candid conversations, if you promote, and you do it yourself, one-on-one with these 5 people on a weekly basis, and you have, I sometimes use toys a little bit. Maybe when you have something difficult to say, I usually have a little soft toy, a little elephant. So you can put the elephant on the table. Maybe use some humor, become curious, or to ask this difficult question. If you come up with your elephant, you can
Tell
say,
me more
hey,
about
team.
this elephant. Like, what would you do with that?
Just, hey, team, if you have something that you'd like to say, because usually people have a lot to say and they see a lot, but they don't want to, they're not sure. Well, maybe if you want to say something, take the elephant, put it on the table, and we will know that you have something hard to talk.
Okay. What about so this is interesting because I've been in a lot of conference rooms where there is probably no lack of opinions coming from people. So I might have the opposite problem from what you talked about there. What do you do in that situation, right? Where everyone's going to put their elephant on the table,
Everybody
right?
has an opinion.
Everyone has an opinion, and no one is shy, right, to share their opinion, right? How
So
would you
who's
coach that?
listening?
How would you talk about that?
Yeah, who's listening? Everybody's talking. Who's listening?
That's I laugh, but you know what? It's a valid question, right? If everyone has an opinion, who's actually listening? That's a good question.
So
So
that's my question. And also, there's probably really good ideas in there. Who is acting on them? I love to. Oh, meetings is a whole topic. Other than there are too many people are disengaged. Here it seems that they're very engaged. Meetings so that we just talk are useless most of the time. So what was the, I know, going back to basics, really fundamentals, but what was the desired outcome of that meeting? Who's actually taking notes? And who is going to take responsibility? That's number one commitment for conscious leadership. Who's going to take responsibility for actually actioning some of these? What was the purpose of the meeting? Why are we here? Who's taking notes? Who's leading? Who's taking the decision? And then who's going to do something? Because otherwise it might have been really interesting, but if you don't follow up with an action or something, it's a bit of a waste of time. So maybe clarifying everybody's role in that meeting.
Yep. Yeah. No, very good. Very practical. I honestly, like, these are very fundamental things, but however, just a simple thing like, let's have an agenda.
Yes.
So that we know and a desired outcome.
A desired outcome, an agenda. Yeah. And if you want to go a little step further, it's sometimes people are shocked when I say that. Look at your desired outcome and the impact of that outcome, and look at the cost of the meeting. Mm-hmm. So look at who was invited in that meeting. Mm-hmm. Probably a whole hour, because most meetings are an hour. Was that really necessary? And just in your head, a quick hourly rate salary for each of these people.
Yeah.
Was it worth it?
Yeah. There were some companies, I think it was last year I was reading, that they started, I think it was Shopify, like a company here in Toronto. They started doing that. Like, they canceled all meetings. Yeah. And then if you create a meeting, they actually did a cost, like a back of the napkin cost analysis. Like, well, this is how much it's costing the company to have this meeting. Is it justified? So yeah, they look at the hourly rate, multiply that by how many hours. Yeah. And this is what it's costing the company. So you got to make sure that you have, desired outcomes.
The right people, the desired outcome, etc. Yeah. It might be a bit extreme, but there is something there, right?
There's something there. I think I don't know the culture there. I know many people who work there, but I don't know the culture. But there was probably an extreme, swing to one side and saying, okay, everything's a meeting. But then, there's other tools that you
and
can use.
Sometimes 5 minutes are enough. You don't need to have a meeting.
Yeah.
And
yeah. There's value. Yeah.
One of the biggest concerns I hear from a lot of leaders is that they tell me that they don't have time to think strategically, actually, and to work. Mm-hmm. Most people tell me they don't have time to work. So it's like meetings all day, and then at 5 p.m. they start the actual work. And that doesn't make sense. So strategic thinking, you need time for it. So you will not, and that comes back to innovation as well. You don't innovate when you're in a meeting when everybody's talking. Mm-hmm. You don't innovate, you don't think, you simply there. You're not producing anything. So for strategic thinking, you will never find time, because it's not going to happen. So you need to consciously choose to take the time to think.
Yeah.
Meetings are in the way of that. It's not all of it, but I think it's a big part.
It's a big part. And I also see, by the way, I get this all the time. I don't have time. But when you ask the question, well, if you can only choose 3 things you could do today, what would it be?
Exactly.
And there's always some form of, oh, I should be there. I have to be there. I want to be there. And this is like, and every individual has to go on their own journey on that, like, to determine what's most important. Some folks might take longer than others, but they got to make a choice, because life only is getting, like, higher up you move, it does not actually get easier. No. You have to make more choices. Yes. And there's no excuse for not thinking strategically about your business. And so if you can't handle it at a first line level, or second line level, you're not going to be able to handle it as you move up.
Yeah. No, right? People think that it's magically, time will magically appears, and then suddenly they will have time to think. Yeah. Now you need to decide today.
Yep.
That you're going to take the time to do that.
You have to be ruthless. You have to be ruthless.
Yeah. And I think this is your added value. And especially if you move up, your added value is to think. Mm-hmm. It's not to go fix the little IT thing.
Yep.
You have people who can do this better than you and faster than you.
Yeah. Well, it shows a lack of trust in their people,
Mhm.
right, to handle things, and a lack of trust in themselves too. Like,
Probably a bit of procrastination there, yes, and a
yeah,
lack of self-confidence, like avoiding the thing that is hard, which
yeah.
is thinking.
The big thinking and the impacts on people.
Yeah.
That's not easy, right? Attending a meeting where people are telling you what to do, or you kind of like just have a side role. It it's easy.
Yes.
Easier.
Easier.
It's not
This
easy.
is where, and it's funny how we go circle back to
Yeah.
conscious leadership, because this
Hmm.
is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Conscious leadership is hard,
Hmm.
very hard.
Yeah.
It's not an easy choice, and it is a daily choice to act in that way.
Yeah. Yep. There's the theory. I appreciate the theory, but I also believe that for all individuals, you just got to go through it, right?
Mhm.
And almost like hit the proverbial wall, and until you understand, oh, this is what Marielle was talking about, right? At least I find like a lot of folks who actually finally come to me and say, I need help with something. They're feeling the walls coming in, right?
Yeah.
And it's because of them not, managing those expectations and having consciousness on how their actions impact others too, right?
Yes.
But that's why there's coaching, right? There's
That's
a
why there's coaching. Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
it's not the theory. The theory or the training can be done in a couple hours.
yep.
It's how do you implement?
It's all about it. But you have a
How do you
framework
live by
here.
it?
Yeah, and it's important to have a framework to coach others with, right?
Yeah.
And that's very important. But yeah, it's unfortunate. Like sometimes you just need to be thrown into the fire, and and you're feeling the heat, and you're like, okay, I need some help here.
Can it, yes, and very often they will come in with that tip of the iceberg, like I need help with this, but that's not really what they need the help with. It's
Yeah,
underneath. It's much bigger,
yeah,
and yeah,
yeah.
this is where the results are fun as well.
That is fun. Um, so Marielle, I have a couple more questions for you. Uh,
Okay.
I guess like when if you had to give, you only had 30 seconds, you had a commercial to give, and you were to give some advice to leaders out there, what would you do in that 30-second spot?
Oh gosh, that's a difficult one. 30 seconds, I would probably say take a deep breath, step back, make that space to think, see where you're at, where you want to go.
And if leaders did that, what becomes possible?
Yes.
Hmm.
Don't stay in that treadmill, right? Because if you're in the weeds, if you're like working like that, you're not seeing anymore. You're not seeing the big picture. So, yeah,
Yep. Yep.
take a deep breath, take a step back, and look where you're at and where you want to go.
Yep. Detaching is very important once in a while. So, another question is, so in all your travels, and you're here right now, if you had to go back to a point in time to a younger version of yourself, it could be yesterday, it could be 10 years ago or longer, what advice would you give to that previous version of Marielle?
To probably be patient and trust that all will be good. Trust your guts. I also wouldn't change anything because I think all the lessons I've learned, I needed to learn them. So difficult to give advice. Probably just to say, hey, you're doing the right thing.
Trust your gut.
Yeah, trust your gut.
Mm. Have some compassion for yourself, right? Trust your gut. Last question to you, Marielle. Um, what's one question I haven't asked you and I should have asked you?
I think we went in depth with a lot of things. We could have talked about somatic coaching, but we we covered a lot in conscious leadership. So maybe we can leave it open.
Okay. Yeah. So, and maybe just, a minute or two, like just if you can talk about like what is significant about somatic coaching and, why that matters.
Why that matters. We live in our heads. And we forget that our body is not just like a little car for the brain. Our whole nervous system is really our brain. So this connection, and it's so important because, well, we talked about self-awareness a lot. Our bodies know, there is a wisdom with our bodies. First of all, there are neurons both on our heart and in our gut for neurons. So our bodies sometimes know before our conscious mind knows something. So we talked about instincts. That's what it is. High pattern recognition without us knowing. So there is immense power in starting to understand what our bodies are saying. And there is, you can use your body to help actually with some of the thinking. So if you see someone who's like this, and you start knowing, if I'm nervous, I'm going to do this. If I just put my shoulders back, I'm basically communicating to my brain that I'm relaxed. Because there's more information that comes from the body to the brain than the brain to the body. So there is a lot of value in understanding a little more about somatic. Our soma is our body.
Yeah.
So these are just a couple examples.
I had someone tell me on a podcast, your story follows your state. And
Yes.
so, and what that means is that the state of your physical state, like whether you have your shoulders down or tense like this, it will tell this, it consciously, unconsciously tells the story like, oh, I'm pissed off right now. You know,
Yes.
like your shoulders like this versus like, no, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And that's what it reminds me of. And a similar thing is what I notice about a lot of high performing executives and business people, like they get really good at reading body language and people. And, you know, I'll give you an early example of my career where I was, you know, in a room, tense conversation with a customer, but I noticed under the desk, his hands were doing this while he was saying something pretty nasty to us. So I realized, and I said it to the guy in the room, I realized he doesn't truly believe in what he's saying. And he actually rehearsed this. So he needs a win here. Right.
There's a disconnect. It's
Yeah.
inauthentic.
Yeah. He was very scared, even though he was saying something very nasty. So he's not a nasty person. He was just posturing. And so, but I tell you that story because we recognize body language in other people, but not very often in ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. And it's recognizing like, oh, like I have butterflies in my stomach. Just say, okay, I'm nervous. It's okay. I'm nervous.
Thank you for telling me.
Yeah. Or like, hey, my shoulders are up here. Like, hey, just chill for a second.
Yeah.
Chill for a second. Like it's
relax your jaw.
Yeah, relax your jaw.
What's so important is that the impact that you have, because we're so good at reading others, right?
But we're
when
terrible
you're
at reading
tense
ourselves.
like that, you have an impact on the person in front of you.
Yes. Yes.
They will sense it, even if you don't know.
Yeah.
And that can change the whole conversation.
That changes a lot of conversations. Yeah. I used to sigh a lot. I still sigh a lot just to relax, but I realized I was doing it too much. Right. Like, I don't know if you notice I sighed a lot in this podcast. I'm not conscious of it, but I'm like, like that. And some people actually said to me one time, like, Dave, were you bored from this conversation? No, I was not bored. It's just a habit to sigh and relax. I'm like, well, you do it too often.
Okay.
Oopsie.
Oopsie. Need to find another way to evacuate the.
Maybe I'll just get my hands to shake like this. You know.
I think a glass of water can be really useful.
Yeah, or
for some people who are nervous.
Yeah,
yes.
A cup of coffee like this.
Yeah, and because what I tell them sometimes when people are really nervous, and especially online and in meetings, what I tell them is if somebody asks you a question and you just have a sip of water, that will give you time to think your response, and to just calm down. Yeah. And nobody will notice that you're doing something weird. Yeah. Just don't give a deep breath while you drink, but
that'd be really funny. You just spit everywhere. Excellent.
It could bring that humor, right, as well. We talked about the elephant, but I have lots of little toys here. I have my little Yoda here.
Oh, hello, Yoda.
Yeah, so he helps me sometimes. Yeah, bring some toys and bring some playfulness
Yeah.
in our meetings. This is also a commitment of conscious leadership, by the
Yeah.
way.
And
Yeah,
it's okay. It's okay. Um, yeah, it doesn't always have to be down to business right away. So,
exactly.
well, Marielle, that's we're almost at 40 minutes now. That's
Wow.
conscious leadership in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, yeah.
Yeah, in a nutshell. But hopefully, everyone here got something, took away at least one or two nuggets from what Marielle talked about. I guess, Marielle, before we go, anything else you want to leave with the listeners?
Oh, I'm hoping that we piqued some people's curiosity a little bit. And yeah, I would love to hear back if there are any comments or any questions.
All right. Well, thanks, Marielle.
Thank you so much.